Wildcat strikes have paralysed South Africa's mining and agricultural sectors at times in recent months, and it's seen as harming the country's economic growth in the long term. Philip Jennings is General Secretary of the UNI Global Union. He joins us for a look at current labour trends in South Africa and beyond. Morning, Philip. I'm going to quote at you something that you said, which I'm sure you'll be people like being quoted. Yeah. Walmart management have sunk to yet another low. Their cynical attempt to rewrite history will not wash. And you talk about the striking Walmart workers in America who were acting courageously and correctly, and clearly you feel they've been intimidated and unfairly treated. And you say the message from South Africa to India, across Latin America to China is the same. Walmart, enough is enough. Stop abusing your power. Why are you so hard on them?
First of all, in the United States of America, where they employ 1.4 million staff, they invest millions in an anti-union campaign, a union-busting campaign. Yesterday, all Walmart staff were called together throughout the country and were warned that if there's any further repeats of industrial action, that disciplinary action would be taken. There is a movement in the United States to get a union together in Walmart. This is an attempt that is serious and nationwide. People walked off the job in November to get the message across to Walmart, and now they're being warned that if there's any repeat of this, then they're going to be in trouble. In South Africa, we've been actively engaged with the trade union movement here with respect to the Massmart Walmart deal, and they're still dragging their heels on the implementation of the legal judgment that was made. We're supposed to have 500 people reinstated. They had a spring clean operation to rid themselves of shop stewards in Massmart. There's still 200 of them waiting to get back in, and we're still in a wrestling match with them about local procurement.
Mm-hmm. Is this Walmart being difficult, or are they trying to catch up? Are they not applying their minds? Our labour relationship environment is much friendlier than it is in the US. Labour is more protected here. Various surveys say that in terms of competition, of competitive labour, we are among the worst in the world. Is it possible for Walmart just to disregard all this in South Africa?
No,
especially also bearing in mind that they've got a local partner in Massmart, who understand our labour environment a lot better and our working conditions as well.
You'd think that they would adapt to the local circumstances here in South Africa, where you have a strong trade union movement, a professional trade union movement that knows its way around the collective bargaining field. And if Walmart would be very foolish to try and do what they're doing in America here or elsewhere for that regard. We have organised Walmart in every single market where they've gone into. But it's always been with a struggle, and it's always been with great difficulty. This week in Brazil, there was the first strike in Walmart in Brazil because of their ignorance of local labour situations and the attempt to try and impose a US labour market model. And that's the warning for everybody here in South Africa. You have problems of inequality, you have problems of unfairness at work, and people look to the US labour market as a model. It is not. The Walmart way of business is not going to solve the development problems of South Africa.
Let's move on to our labour relations environment, and Mike might have a comment on this in a moment. We are said to be uncompetitive. Our wages go up without concomitant increases in productivity. What's your assessment of here? When business says we need more productivity, our wages are too high, the minimum wage is too high in the farm sector now, and it said the jobs will be lost.
It depends who's saying you're uncompetitive. If it's the World Bank doing business report, I wouldn't trust it. And Trevor Manuel is now heading a commission to look at the way that this assessment is made of competitivity. You can't put you can't lay the blame on the labour movement for this. There are too many profound structural issues which have to be addressed here. It is not competitive to have 64% of your kids not making it to year 12. It is not competitive for you to have 5 million people under the age of 35 who can't find work. They're either unemployed or being discouraged from work. You're not going to be competitive unless you have a proper industrial strategy to develop the skills of the workforce. There is massive potential in Africa. We're very optimistic about the development of Africa going forward, but you've got to get the soft bit of the economy right, in terms of skills development, in terms of apprenticeships. Learn from those good models, learn from the German model, learn from the Nordic model, where they invest in the soft skills of their people to ensure that you have people ready for work. Wherever I go, I hear employers telling me, Philip, we can't find skilled people. We can't find people who've got the skills which will enable us to lift our productivity. You have a productivity challenge in the country. It can be resolved. It can be fixed in working with the labour movement here.
Your response to that, Mike, because of course that productivity issue was highlighted by Mark Kutufani yesterday when he said we don't talk about productivity. It may not be the most important issue today, but in 10 to 15 years' time, it will be the most important. It's the only thing that will lift South Africa out of poverty.
Well, the economic root of GDP growth, real GDP growth, is productivity and employment growth. So if you want to get high growth going, you've got to get both of those things going. And I agree with Philip. I mean, there's some real fundamental structural issues. We've been talking about our companies all moving out of the country. And yet our population's now starting to grow. We're starting to get the AIDS thing more or less, not under control, but better under control. And our population's starting to grow. But now the age group's completely skewed. The social costs that government is having to bear because of all of this in an increasingly urbanizing environment is extremely onerous. That's why we're not getting fixed investment in infrastructure, because it's all going into social wages. And then you say to yourself, well, okay, so now you've got a relationship between government and labour as an alliance, and business that is completely deteriorating. But in reality, business is what creates the jobs. So there needs to be cooperation. Every civilized society, the root of a civilized society is cooperation. It's not fighting. And if you're going to fight, then people will just come, businesses will just say, we don't want to play here. We want to go and find a better, more business-friendly environment to play in.
Philip, beyond South Africa, we talk to Kenya every morning, we talk to Nigeria. We don't often talk about union issues and labour issues in the rest of the continent of Africa. Big picture, what are the trends?
Big picture, the employment markets here are skewed too much towards the informal sector. When you look at the distribution of employment, of where quality work and where decent work is, this is a minority of the population. Therefore, we have to try and find a way of taking the informal into the formal sector. This will help boost aggregate demand, and it will lift the skills of the workforce. The trade union movement in this continent is alive, it's robust. They are facing enormous structural changes, but they are reaching out to new members, and they are in fact growing.
Isn't one of the problems, though, that trade unions look after their members, not the poor, and can actually look after their members at the expense of the poor?
That is absolutely, fundamentally wrong. We're in the business of lifting all the boats. When we organise workers in an enterprise, when we organise workers throughout an industry, we're trying to lift standards everywhere. We're in the business of trying to lift all of the boats. This characterization that we're only interested in a small group of employees who are employed is fundamentally wrong. In every argument we make, whether it's at the G20 or with national governments or in regional structures, it's about trying to put employment back on the agenda in a much more prominent role than it has been, and to argue about the quality of life of everybody.
But there's a cost to that too. If the decent wage, for example, yes, one wants a decent wage, but it may be at the expense of other people not having wages at all. Isn't there a compromise area between these two?
There's always a place for compromise, and we're not in the business of putting business out of business. We have a situation in the world today which contradicts what you're saying. We have levels of inequality which we have never seen. We have a system of distribution of wealth now, which means that the wealth is floating to the top. 20% of the population of this country have 70% of its wealth. The bottom 20% have 2.9% of the wealth. So to blame those people at the lower end for the economic malaise elsewhere is incorrect. In fact, we have to find a way of lifting the boats of those at the lower end quicker than those at the top. So there's going to be a wrestling match between us about this. There will be an argument about income distribution, but income distribution is going wrong. This is bad for demand in the economy. It's bad for the morale of a country. You have a malaise, there's a feeling of marginalization here. The situation is very combustible. Why? Because you have a third of the population not in work, and you have the highest levels of inequality anywhere. You address this with the labour movement, you address this through collective bargaining, and yes, I'm happy to sit down with any employer and find a fairer way of distributing the cake, because that's not happening today.